Hello everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Reviews with Tyberius D. I'm still gotta break this in. Usually we'd have a wonderful intro lined out, nice little flashy videos and stuff, but we're not quite there yet. We're probably gonna have to do a couple videos before our graphics artist and our basically our creative team backs this project in full. Sometimes they like to, make sure I'm gonna commit to something before we get that. But anyway, just a quick introduction to who I am. I'm Tyberius D. I do a lot of geopolitics and, a lot of other content relating to political stuff on Twitch and on YouTube. But, I was talking with my family the other day about, like, Star Wars and a few other things that's going on, like the MCU. And I really like stories. I like how, stories develop and how characters develop. And basically, the long and short of, like, the creative process of what turns into the content that we consume. It's good fun, and today I'm going to talk about, one of the Mac Daddy things of it, which is the Star Wars trilogies, and it's basically just a general review of the entire, 9 movies. And yes, I know there's other movies here like Rogue One, or maybe even like the animated Clone Wars movie or what have you. I'm not going to touch those today, even though I think some of them are better than others, and some of them are definitely worth talking about. That'll be more of a, a one movie kind of stand. But I just want to talk about Star Wars in general, basically the main movies, if you will. Talk about the good, talk about the bad, just give you my reviews about why these movies are so important, why they're, some of them are trash. And we'll definitely get into this. So without further ado, we're going to start with the original trilogy. And, I could be a little bit ranty. Chat, help me out here if you're here on Twitch. And by the way, if you are watching this on the YouTube, on the new channel, definitely check out my Twitch, where I do all the things where I record them, and I do them live stream. And then basically, if you want to, you can check out the other content, whether it's on YouTube, or you want to check me out by, contacting me on LinkedIn and Twitter and all these other things. Without further ado, though, definitely want to hit the original trilogy. So, what is it, 1977, Star Wars A New Hope comes out, and people are floored, people are blown away. What is so great about this movie? And then, of course, you'll have Empire Strikes Back in 1980, and The Return of the Jedi in 1983. These movies are huge, they're impactful. And the question is why? Well, in a nutshell, they're good. And we'll definitely break these down quite a bit, and they'll actually all have their own trilogy episodes where I'll go in and talk about the trilogy writ large, and then I'll also get into each single movie and know why those are good. But as a general overview, it's the late 70s, the early 80s, is that movies, they don't have a lot of spectacle to them. You've got to have a pretty decent plot. Not to say every movie back then was a winner, but they're definitely a lot better now than I could name a couple of movies out there where you can just ooh and awe people with sheer and utter spectacle and not give people a really decent plot or really decent characters. I'm going to just say it now. You can't pull a Transformers back in the 1980s. But anyway, let's get off of that. For anyone who's wanting to know, I won't be posting up any video or excerpts from the movies or anything like that. And the reason why is, number one, I don't want to deal with copyright claims or fighting YouTube on it, because YouTube's copyright system is absolutely jacked, and it's not fun. And as far as Twitch has their own level of things. So I want to make this just as universally accepted as possible, and open to where, we can definitely have that kind of content freely available for everyone to watch. Basically just me rant and yell at chat for about, 20, 30 minutes or maybe even longer. Sorry, still breaking this in. Anyway, so why are these good movies? Well, basically, the plot's generally decent. We can talk about which movies are a little bit better than others. I'll kind of get into that here in just a moment. First Osiris, true. Osiris is a really good friend of mine in the chat. Definitely have that. No, it's not going to be a short stream. The first trilogy is good. The others are all meh. I'm going to largely agree with that. But let's get into the nuts and bolts here. So, original trilogy, they're good. And why is that? Well, the characters are good. The plot's relatively solid. I can throw a few nitpicks at it here and there, but there's something to like from most people here. So let's talk about the plot in general, right? It's the typical hero's journey. And of course, the plot revolves around Luke Skywalker. He's the main protagonist. In one of the better things about the original Star Wars trilogy is that while Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, is the protagonist, is that the side characters aren't really side characters as much as they become side protagonists or secondary protagonists. And that's really, really good because, A New Hope definitely has Luke. He is the main character, even though, you don't meet him until like 30, 40 minutes in. But his journey is what matters here. And you meet some powerful characters on the way. Han Solo, pretty interesting guy, swashbuckler kind of thing. And then you have, of course, the lady of all time, Princess Leia, which is just an absolute ass kicker, for women and men alike, respectively. We can definitely get into those characters writ large, but as a whole, is that there's not really any kind of incompetent character. I'll get to that later, IPA. There's not a lot of competence or lacking of competence in these characters, right? There's something to emphasize with. I can't word today. Or emphasize. I can't word. Okay, sorry. There's something to like in each of these characters largely, and then on top of that, if you want to go further, is that they all do have some kind of flaw. You don't really see the flaws explored in particularly Princess Leia in the first movie, but you do get a little bit of that into the second movie. But going about this in the way that it is, it's typical hero's journey for Luke. All right, he's a young man, wants to be part of something greater in the world. A lot of people can aspire to that, right? And the universe is in motion. You have the Galactic Empire, which is basically this tyrannical government going about and kind of making people's lives hell. And you have some kind of rebellion or resistance that is fighting against them. You don't get a lot of details to this, but it's very open-ended. And this is why it's such a good sync, is that the first movie is really good because it gives you enough of this universe that you're like, oh yeah, this is cool. X-Wings, yeah, that seems really neat. All of these little things. It's got a princess, obviously. It's got a lot of kind of old school, like, I don't know how to put this. It had like the damsel of distress at the beginning of it. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only help. But then it kind of marries it into some newer school, newer ways of looking about things. Where it's like, oh, wait, the princess is actually a badass and goes around kicking people in the teeth. And also it goes about, it's like, oh, hey, this is a rebellion. This is a very political struggle. You get tidbits of it, but you're not sold the whole thing. And it kind of, leaves you wanting more. Like, hey, what's going on in this universe? But it also gives you people to root for, people to understand. And we'll talk a little about Luke again. Is that Luke is a young man who wants to be part of something greater. Almost every young man goes through that age in his life, and even young women, I would assume, too. Largely assume. Sorry. Anyway, a lot of people would like to be part of something greater than themselves and actually be part of turning the tide and being part of going on an epic adventure, right? And just anything that most teenagers and people in their 20s would like to do. Yeah, they're almost 50 years late there, so don't worry about that, IPA. Let's be honest, Princess Leia's side buns. Can we? Okay. I'm just gonna leave chat alone for a minute here. You guys can sort that bullshit out. Anyway, yeah, let's talk about this. Luke is a little whiny in the first movie, but he's not overtly whiny like Anakin will be in later movies. To where you don't like him. He's just, he's like, hey, I wanted to go to or I was going to do this. Hey, I want to do that. But then he's actually forced upon the hero's journey when everything goes to shit. And you don't really experience it a lot because there's not a lot of screen time with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, but he loses his family. They die. Granted, this is already the halfway point in the movie, but I would say that's actually one of the only real major flaws, is that you're introduced to Princess Leia, but she's actually not the main protagonist. And it's it is a little bit sad because in some ways she's a side protagonist, but she doesn't get that in this movie. And that's actually one of the bigger flaws of A New Hope. But going forward is that it all kind of comes back, at least in this movie, and wraps up around in a nice little bow. You have one character that leads you to another, and then it goes full circle. And there has been arguments, at least that I've seen, that actually the protagonists are C-3PO and R2-D2. Kind of, in a way, yeah, they are. Like, there's an entire section of the movie that is them. They are the point of view characters. I think that kind of loses the plot. Like, there's no major character moments for them. There's no, like, major changes in the personalities that they have. But what you do have is that they are the facilitators of the rest of the story, where they bridge Princess Leia to Luke, Luke to Han, and then the gang's all together on the Death Star, and then, the final battle. And this is really good, because everyone gets a little bit of what they were aiming for. They all go about on this journey, at least in this particular movie, and get at least something of what they wanted. Luke becomes literally a hero. Takes down the Death Star, that kind of thing. There's some nitty gritty, and like we can get into that. Whether there's details that are left out, but as a general overall performance, is that Luke kind of has his mini hero's journey where he becomes a hero. You have Leia, who is on a mission to get the Death Star plans, and her journey in the movie is the destruction of the Death Star. Excuse me, the Death Star itself. That happens too, and so her plot arc is fulfilled. The only other one that isn't kind of fulfilled, but is signed in a way, is Han's. Han is basically, you kind of get the idea he's in some trouble, he owes some people some money, that kind of thing. He's looking for fame, he's looking for rewards, he wants to escape that. And to some degree, he kind of gets that in helping out, because he actually finds like a bit of a community and people to, go about with his struggle in. But he doesn't really escape that. And of course that leads into what we'll see in Empire Strikes Back. But it's a good movie. It gives a lot of people hope, gives two people, men and women, characters that they can, empathize with and get behind and root for, while also having a general narrative that, not a general narrative. It has a bunch of different narrative and story arcs that are both old age and modern that kind of wrap all together in this nice little bow in the summer of 1977. And so, yeah, great movie. It has some problems, don't get me wrong, every movie is not perfect, but it is a really good movie. And it's actually the second best one out of the original trilogy. Let's get to the best one. Yes, I'm going to say it. Empire is the best one. We'll talk about that in its own episode, but basically it's set a year later. And what's going on is Luke is, participating in his journey, following through with A New Hope, where he's trying to learn the ways of the Force, become some kind of greater master than what he already was, which, he doesn't really know what he's dealing with. He was trained by Yoda. His whole arc is largely two things. One, actually understanding and coming to terms with what the Force is and how to deal with that. But also, he's going to have another arc about patience and understanding. And a lot of people are missed on that in Empire, but he actually screws up. He goes to fight Vader before he's ready, and it punishes him. He literally gets his hand chopped off. That is that's a huge thing that happens, and it's a major plot point. Okay, apparently my chat's just going to troll me the entire episode. But yeah, if you like what's going on here, definitely feel free to chat. And if you have something to add into that, definitely come check out my stuff on Twitch. Anyway, going forward, Luke has a thing about patience. He's very impatient throughout the movie, and this is kind of seen, particularly with this training with Yoda, is that he gives up. He doesn't really stick it out, and then when he try to basically jumps the gun, he pays serious consequences for it, and that is something that a lot of young men have to deal with. Patience is a hard thing to do, especially when you're a horny young teenager, or horny young 20-year-old. Just hormones and chemicals, and I remember being that way. And it's a time, but you kind of need to learn to slow your roll a little bit. And there's something to empathize a lot with that too. And it pretty much, if anyone lives through their 20s, most people, if they've lived their lives, is going to have a few experiences that they, sometimes regret, sometimes feel like they paid for. Sometimes there is a trauma, and that's very much the case kind of with this movie. Everyone kind of gets hosed a little bit. Han's story kind of comes not full circle, but what picks up from New Hope is that he's in trouble. It comes full circle to where he's literally frozen in carbonite. by the guy he owes money to, Jabba the Hutt. And he's also trying to deal with his relationships because he's kind of been... You kind of get the idea that he's been a loner. He's been a guy that just does his own thing, and he's basically his own man and his own boss. But then he finds other obligations as a member of the rebellion, and basically realizing that it's hinted that he does have serious feelings for Princess Leia. However, you also see that he tries to play it cool. You know, that whole scene where, I love you, I know. You know, he's making a journey, and you see it only through the trilogy itself, but he's becoming somebody else, and that's somebody that is not just relying upon himself and maybe Chewie, but being a part of a greater whole. And actually, this is kind of the sad part about the newer movies, is that he largely isn't that person. Like, he literally goes back to what he originally was. Damn the sequel trilogy. We'll get to that later. Anyway, Han is punished as well, is that his past catches up to him. And, he has to pay for it. And it leads you into the third movie in regarding of, all right, is our intrepid hero actually going to get out of this situation? Because a lot of them leave Empire licking their wounds. Luke's hands chopped off, Han's frozen in carbonite, and Leia is pretty much the only one who's running the ship at that point, which just goes to show how much of a badass that she is. Leia's journey is a little interesting in this one, because there's the whole romance thing with her and Han, and for me, there's a part that doesn't get sold in Empire, and this is literally like my only major criticism of Empire, is that I don't see the connection between these two characters that well. It's not shown why they really like each other, and particularly with Leia, is that Leia really does seem to scorn him. And I guess it's the whole bad boy archetype, really, that she's into, which is very unfortunate, because Leia could command a strong presence in getting any kind of man that she would largely want. So that's sad. I don't care for that, to be honest. But everything else is like top-notch solid. One of my favorite things about Empire, and why I think it's the best movie, is that it shows that the Empire is no joke. The Empire is constantly thwarting the heroes at every nick and turn, even when it looks like they've gotten the better of them, or gotten away. Is that, oh, hey, cool, Han Solo pulls the trick, he's out with the garbage, and then all of a sudden he flies off to Cloud City, and then, oh, Vader's there. The Empire is menacing. It actually kills people. They win the original battle at the beginning. The Empire is no joke, and that's actually the reason why I like Empire so much, is that it shows what the rebellion is actually going against, and the Empire is competent. You don't see stormtroopers going around and just missing every shot against Luke in the middle of the Death Star. Is that they're taking on armies, they're crushing the rebellion, and the rebellion's basically just trying to make ends meet and get by. It flushes out that universe in a very big way. And it really is a nice add-on to New Hope. Not going to say New Hope was bad anyway, but the Empire's a little lackluster. Like, how do you get on the Death Star and actually live? But to a large degree, yeah, Empire's the best because it's the most believable. There's massive stakes and massive things going on at play, and the good guys don't necessarily win. And you'll find this in a lot of my reviews. I tend to like the movies that the bad guys kind of get away with it a little bit. And it's not because I root for the bad guys nearly as much as movies don't sell me on the bad guys being bad guys. They don't sell me on them being competent. They don't sell me on them being a threat. They're kind of a joke in a lot of movies. And you're just like, wow, this Empire got toppled, and we'll talk about this in Return of the Jedi, by freaking Ewoks. So yeah, at least for where I'm at with this, is that Empire's great. The only real major criticism I have of it is that Leia and Han don't really seem to match with me. I don't really see the chemistry personally. But it's almost a perfect movie for that middle section of the trilogy, and it works very, very well. So let's go into. Oh, I'm sorry. I do apologize. I need to make a correction. Empire is set 3 years after A New Hope. Return of the Jedi is set 1 year after Set 1 year after Empire. So, let's talk about Return of the Jedi. Good movie. Not great. It actually has probably more problems with, as a whole, than any of the original 3. And it's one of those deals where sometimes it's a little bit hard to wrap everything up in a nice little bow, but it also kind of fails to really make some serious impacts in the way that it really should. There's some really good parts in here. Luke's journey, going full circle, where he's becoming his own man, and he understands the consequences of his actions in regarding the first movie, where he's along for the ride. He's actually taking part. He's a unit, if you will. He's going about, and he's a major person to be reckoned with. But also, his journey's not quite complete. He has things that he has to struggle with, particularly with dealing with the fact that Vader is his father, going about and taking on the Emperor, and realizing that he hasn't mastered the full depths of his powers. It's kind of indicated that he's gotten pretty proficient, and definitely when you see the confrontation with Vader, he's pretty strong, and he actually makes the choices that, hey, he could give in to the dark side. And at least for a minute, he does. Basically, when he's wailing on Vader and cuts off his hand, he does give in to the dark side. But his journey comes full circle where he makes the choice towards the end. No, I'll never join the dark side. That is a pretty good movie, to be sure. And so Luke's largely wrapped up pretty well. Han's character, Han's character is handled relatively well. It's not that he really learns anything, like he's unfrozen from carbonite. He's basically bailed out by his friends, and he largely kind of appreciates his friends and basically appreciates that he's part of a greater family. Still not sold on the whole Leia thing, but at least it kind of is more believable that they all care for each other and respect each other and love each other, because they're willing to sacrifice so much for Han, which is kind of the black sheep of the little trio, and it works really well. Excuse me. Han's character is interesting because he doesn't really have a major character growth moment outside of the fact that he's just kind of accepts that he's part of his family, if you will, a part of the trio and part of something greater. But they don't really explore that in a major facet, and that's sad. Is that Han never really has any dialogue about going from what he had been to what he was going before. It's largely implied. You kind of just have to read between the lines a little bit. He's too much of, the bad boy or the pretty boy that is largely there as a stand-in for the ladies to eye goggle. And, hey, it's Harrison Ford. It works. But on the other side of that is that the character could have been explored a little bit more. And that is a bit sad. Leia comes off strong. She's basically, part of leading the charge throughout most of the... Is Han just a stereotype character? I don't think he's a stereotype. I think he's underutilized, is basically the word that I would use throughout the original trilogy, is that he's not explored nearly to the degree that he could have been. And, maybe he couldn't have been. There's a lot going on in these movies. But I do think he's not fully utilized to what he could be. That is a serious criticism I have. Leia doesn't have the hero's journey really at all. Hers was largely mini arcs, and I can actually make this as a criticism too, is that Leia really doesn't seem to have any kind of major journey. However, I think Return of the Jedi does give her something to tag onto, but it's not explored that very, very well either, because most of it's just thrust upon Luke. And that is, Leia understands that there's even more to her life than what she understood, and that is the fact that she's Luke's brother, Vader is her father as well, and, there's basically even more to her life than what she already knew. And that's also explored in her relationship with Han and basically, taking on the Empire. That is underutilized as well. And this is actually why basically, I feel so bad, but I'm tearing Return of the Jedi apart here a little bit. It's a good movie. It misses out on a few things that really could have took it over the top. And to give you an example of why, I'm gonna hit it because I already did, and I'm gonna finish it out, is that the Ewoks completely underserved the movie. it makes the Empire look like a joke. They're taken down by freaking teddy bears. A lot of the time that is spent on Endor. I'm going to ignore that comment. All right. Anyway, a lot of the time in the movie that's spent on Endor could have been a lot more time flushing out Leia's character and Han's character, because they're on screen, they're doing stuff, but they don't really have any kind of real character moments that really go about changing their character or showing that they are changing and going through their own journey nearly as much as this is just good at getting the task done. Blow up the generator, stop the shield, all that. The only part that actually is there is Luke telling Leia that they're brother and sister, and her realizing that she knew. That's really the only part on Endor that makes a lot of, if you will, the journey and the storytelling arc actually matter. And that's unfortunate, because it could have been used in such a greater way. So yeah, unfortunately, Revenge of the Jedi is the least good of any of the original trilogy, and I hate to say that, but it is. And it's just one of those deals where the final movie is always going to be the hardest to wrap up in a nice bow and to get it to where it needs to go. It does pretty well for the general story, but largely it's thrust upon Luke. And I have to tag this. The biggest problem for me, personally, throughout the series, is that Vader, and I'm going to say it, big take here, Vader isn't a good villain. Vader is intimidating as crap. Vader's kind of cool in the way that he is intimidating, but he's not explored as a character, hardly at all. There's a few tidbits here and there, particularly with Empire, that, oh, hey, he's Luke's father. But Jedi completely drops the ball in the regard that you don't explore why he is who he is. You don't know why he's working for the Emperor. You have no idea why he turned to the dark side. You really don't get any of these. It's kind of implied that he was lusting for power by Obi-Wan, but that's it. That's nothing. Vader really doesn't become a character. And I'm serious. Vader is a force of presence. He is something to be overcome, but he is, to actually put it in there, yeah, he's kind of a side character. I wouldn't say he's not a character at all. He is an obstacle. And it works in the way that they do Vader, and I think this is why people love Vader so much. He doing a force, and what I mean by a force is that they're not a character, but they're an act. They are a presence on screen or in storytelling, but they don't have a lot of modus operandi behind them. You can do that. You can be cryptic about it. But it is a little lackluster, in my opinion, because it doesn't really explore the motivations of that character. It doesn't turn them into one, if you will. And so Vader, at least in my opinion, isn't really a character. He is a force of nature. He is something that exists to be overcome. And that's unfortunate, because Vader could have been an amazing character. And his redemption arc in Return of the Jedi could have been great, but you don't understand, one, how he gets to be Vader at all, or very little. And then on top of that is that you don't really understand what makes him turn to helping Luke at the very end and throwing the Emperor off a cliff. Well, down the, what is it, the elevator shaft or whatever the hell it is. And that's very unfortunate, because this character could have been explored so much more. And that's, again, just the problem with Return of the Jedi, in a nutshell, is that there's a lot of times that's dropped into other things. Granted, there's a lot going on in that movie, but it's dropped into things that it really shouldn't have been. Should have been exploring Vader. A good 2, 3, 5 minutes of dialogue between Vader and the Emperor would have been great. And there's a little bit of that, obviously, in Return of the Jedi and Empire, about, him, Luke Skywalker, being the son of Vader, or Anakin Skywalker, as it's put. It's just not taken into fruition at all, and it really should have been. And I can really hit this again. Who's the Emperor? You're only introduced to him largely in the third movie. He's a little bit there in the second. You know he's a thing, but you have no idea who this character is. He's a force of nature too. I'm gonna wrap it up with this. Jedi is critically underserved in the fact that the characters that need to be explored are not explored, and that's unfortunate. The plot is served very well. Luke has a nice bow on top of him, and you do get some appreciation for Vader, but you really don't you really don't get the transition of why Vader is who he is at all. And so he's really not a character. And I apologize for repeating myself. So, 30 minutes in, we've pretty much wrapped up the original trilogy. This is probably going to go a lot shorter for the other two because they're kind of trash. Or really trash. So let's hit the prequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy is pretty bad. Let's talk about why. The characters, the plot is discombobulated. Phantom Menace makes no sense in being there at all. It kind of sets there. It's kind of there for. Excuse me. It's kind of there to set the tone, but it doesn't really even do that very well. It just kind of introduces you to a few characters, some of which die and are underutilized, and that goes through the entire. It goes through the entire trilogy. Is that everything that really is set up is underutilized, particularly Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn really is an interesting character and something that really drew me to the first movie, even as a child. He's an interesting character. You get the sense that he is his own man. He walks his own way, even throughout his journeys at the Jedi Council. Is that there's something different about him, and it's a shame because there's so much that could have been explored with that. You get the sense of who Obi-Wan is, and the argument is largely that Obi-Wan is the protagonist of the prequel trilogy and not Anakin. And there's actually some truth to say that because Obi-Wan, you're introduced to him straight away. He is there throughout the entire screen time. Like, the plot at minimum revolves halfway around him. I'm not going to say you're wrong. However, the real plot here is actually about Anakin and how Anakin basically becomes somebody who is supposed to be prominent, well-received, generally liked and loved, and falls to darkness. And the trilogy completely undersells this. Completely just drops the ball on this. The first movie really doesn't just establishes him as a character. It could have done so much more with him, and it really should have. And on my honest opinion, it really should have had him as a teenager. Yes, I know you'd have to rewrite the continuity of, having teenagers being trained by the Jedi, but, at that time you could have, because Lucas was just making this. And so it'd be different, but it'd totally be workable. Yeah, he probably should have been like a 13, 14-year-old angsty teenager. Movie 1 with that. Movie 2 is largely him going through Luke's journey where he's becoming powerful. But the difference in movie 3 is that when he actually has the choice to make, he fails. And so, to wrap this up in a neat little shell as far as Anakin's story, movie 1 sets him up, but doesn't do nearly enough to do that. Movie 2 basically just shows that he's become something, but you don't really experience that. You don't really see him grow, because there's a 10-year time skip between 1 and 2. That wasn't a really good decision. This should have been his trials and tribulations, and the only thing that you really have out of that is him getting bodied by Dooku, but you don't really see him actually training and working to become something greater than what he is. The only good thing about the original trilogy is that Revenge of the Sith is actually the only decent movie, and that's still a bit of a stretch, but it's not bad. It actually does do Anakin's story not justice, but it actually presents it in a way that is a little bit understandable. It shows his transition to the dark side, and when he actually has the decision. And of course, that's the scene where he intervenes between Windu and Palpatine, Sidious, to actually decide who he's going to help. And he, of course, chooses darkness because of his fear of losing his loved ones. Revenge of the Sith is by far the best of the original 3. It's the only one that's even remotely good at all. And I wouldn't even say it's good, it's just okay, it's decent. But it has a lot of room to grow. I would say that the problem with Revenge of the Sith is actually that it's underserved by the original 2. Is that you want to come into a Revenge of the Sith wanting to root for Anakin, and that's absolutely not the case. The first one is you don't really even get he's a kid, and he's a completely different character going into movie 2, so it's completely worthless. And then movie 2 has him largely as a whiny bitch who's already doing the wrong thing with slaughtering the Sand People, and it should have been focused a lot more on him training and dealing with his inner demons, and honestly, he should have been winning, but he doesn't. Just the prequel trilogy is just poorly written, personally, and it sucks. The characters could have been so much more, so much greater, and they're not. And that just gets into the side characters even worse. C-3PO is there. Why? That's nostalgia. R2-D2 is there. Why? It's just nostalgia again. And a lot of the other characters are either just underserved, Qui-Gon Jinn, or just don't really go through the journeys that they really should have. Obi-Wan's the same character from start to finish. He doesn't really change at all. And that's very sad. Like, he should have... You could have done something with this character. He's cool, he's snarky, particularly come movie 3, but he's not a major great character. And that's really sad. I know I wasn't largely going to talk about the other content within Star Wars, but I'm at least going to give you this. The Clone Wars animated show made by Dave Filoni, whether you like it or not, and there's some definitely likes or good not, or things to like and hate about that series, is that it really shows both of these characters go through that journey. Now, granted, it's 7 seasons of a TV show, plenty of content, right? You can explore these characters, but you could have done that. You could have done most of the character arcs within those stories. You could have highlighted them and put it, that the original 3 movies could have done that really well, and they didn't, and that's sad. Like, the Clone Wars, ironically enough, does more justice to these characters than the prequel trilogy does. That's just, it's sad and it's unfortunate, but that's this series. So I'm going to largely wrap up with that. We can talk about a few other things. We can talk about Padme and a lot of other else, but I'll largely talk about that within its own, with the own videos within the series. So let's talk about the sequel trilogy, which is even worse. Let's start off. This hit all the right boxes with The Force Awakens starting out. Looked to be really good. Rey seems to be very interesting. She's hardy. She's a bit of an ass kicker, something to emphasize with, but she's not. She's in a rut. She's basically doing her own hero's journey, like Luke is, but she has no one. And hers is even easier to do because she's gonna, become part of something else. She has a lot to look forward to going into this. And the only real problem with The Force Awakens and Rey is that she's a little OP. She's able to take down Kylo Ren. Granted, Kylo Ren had a blaster bolt blasted to him, which usually would kill people deader in hell. But it's not really sold, the final conflict between her and him, and she's really comes off as overpowered. And to compare her to Luke is that Luke goes through a little bit of training, and to show you a compare and contrast. There's the scene with Luke and the little floaty ball thing that shoots him, and he's trying to use the blaster. Obi-Wan's teaching him how to use the Force, and he understands a little bit. And if you had that scene for Rey, something like that, where she actually has to understand how to use a lightsaber and like what her powers are, that would have been great. But she literally just mind tricks somebody getting out of basically jail or whatever it is. And goes about it, and it's just from the stories that she heard. There's no training, there's no real work to be done to validate this character, and that's very unfortunate. It's very sad. Rey is very much underserved, and it only gets worse going into the next 2 movies. But Rey could have been something fantastic. Finn, I had a lot of hope for. Finn was starting out to be a really good character. A stormtrooper that freaking defects. Amazing plot point. And you really see this character become a character straight out of the gate. Like, even without seeing his face, you see the emotion. This is wrong. We shouldn't do this. And that's the massacre at the beginning of the movie. And he defects. He escapes with Poe. And he's largely the character of the first movie. But he's a little bit sidelined. But he is the only really fleshed out character throughout that, and he's basically just trying to make a full transition in which he kind of doesn't, and that's okay because that gave him plenty of room to grow in the next two movies. However, there's a little bit of problem. Number one, he struggles because he's in something that he's not familiar with. He was raised by the First Order. He defects, and he doesn't really know how to operate by himself, and he fumbles, and that's wonderful. It's a very interesting storyline, and then he comes to really like Rey and Poe, which is totally believable because it's basically his family. he kind of fills the Han Solo card from the original trilogy, but believes it. It like makes it believable, unironically. And so it works really well for Finn. And the only problem I have with Finn's character is that he basically gets bitched. One, he gets a lightsaber to the back, which probably should have killed him, to be honest. But it's a whole level of basically what Kylo should have done is just force pushed him in a wall and just like showed dominance, and then Rey takes the fight to him, and that would have been great. But Finn's actually absolutely the best character in A Force Awakens. Excuse me, by far. And I was really excited to see where that was going to go going forward. And oh my God, he's just completely railed. Was it John Boyega, I believe his name is? I feel so bad for all of the actors that got to participate in the sequel trilogy. This could have been something to live a lifetime for. And, being a part of Star Wars, they kind of will have that either way, but they're not good characters, and I can't imagine how bad that would have been. It should have paralyzed him. It looked like it went up his spine, or at least very close to it, but, whatever. Let's talk about Poe. Poe's really exciting. You kind of get the Han Solo vibe from him in the regards that he's the cool guy, he's the ladies' man, but he's a lot more confident. He's part of something greater. He's already where he needs to be. And so he's largely along for the ride. And there's no problem with that. And that's the only problem with this character in this movie, is that he really doesn't have any kind of major journey to go through. He's largely just a facilitator of everything going on. They try to do more with the second and third movie with him, and unfortunately, just Rian Johnson, you suck. So anyway, at least where I'm going with this is that Poe didn't serve a lot in the Force Awakens, but he didn't really need to. He's cool, he's dashing, he's got character all to himself. He's just not needed, and maybe he could have been needed a little more. Like his journey he could have had a bit of a mini journey within itself, but it wasn't needed. And so Poe was underutilized. Well, I said that, but that's more for the second and third movie, but I'll tag that here in a minute. Could have been underutilized in some ways, yeah. He could have been more of a character. But I don't think he needed to be. It would have been fine to have the first movie just been Rey and Finn as their characters. That would have been good. As the characters in transition. You don't need to do it. Everyone doesn't need to have their own story arc. It just helps if they do. And then, of course, we have to get to the antagonist, because the antagonist is important here, and that is obviously Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren is actually the best villain in Star Wars, in the Star Wars trilogies. And that's shocking, dare I say, but he's a character. He is an actual character. He's better than Maul, who is a mute and only says, like, 3 things. He's better than Dooku, who is... Like, what? Like, what is Dooku's motivations? Oh, I'm old, and I'm doing bad things. And then Grievous is also undersold. Just the problem with the original trilogy, or I'm sorry, not the original, the prequel trilogy, is that it doesn't have a consistent antagonist. And that definitely hurts. Kylo Ren, at least for the most part, from movies 1 and 2, is a antagonist. He is a character. He has flaws and reasons. He gave in the dark side because he wanted power. It explores to a bit why he did, but he's a son of prominence, basically wanted to be the shadow of his grandfather, Vader. And that gives him motivation, gives him reason for doing what he does. It was... The Force Awakens is by far the best of the 3. I'm not going to say it's great by any measure. Characters underutilized. I would say that Han's largely character assassinated. He shouldn't be off on his own. Granted, they largely try to sell it, and they sell it to some degree, that the reason that Han goes off by himself is that, the family falls apart, Ben becomes his own thing, and all that. For what it works, it works, actually. I don't like the choices that are made, necessarily, but, some characters can regress, and you at least get an idea that these characters had regressed. Bad things had happened. Ben went to the dark side. Leia's kind of just doing her own thing, trying to keep the whole New Republic together. And she's obviously not even getting a lot of support because she's holding the resistance. And Han went off to do his own thing. So that's not horrible. I'm not going to say it's good. They could have done a little bit more to sell it. But they could have done a lot more with these characters, but honestly, they're done okay. And I think a lot of people miss the Force for the trees in that. And what really kind of pulls the Force Awakens apart is really the end. It's Kylo deciding to kill Han and making that choice. It's done more for shock value. It's done more for the spectacle, and it really is. You don't explore Kylo's motivation to do that, and that you can't do. You can't not have somebody kill their own father and not explore why he would do that. Like, what is the temptation that makes him want to do that? You know, the whole like free me from this pain thing just doesn't do it. You got to put way more effort into that, and that doesn't happen. I thought they would put a spin on Vader as someone to be driven to protect the galaxy and oppose order after the death of his mother. They could have done that. They definitely could have done that. And to some degree, they kind of do in movie 3. You know, a lot of what haunts Anakin is the fact that his mother died and he didn't want to lose Padme. And that's kind of the spin that they have with it. But I don't think they sell it right. But we already talked about that. I'm sorry, no nonsense. Definitely check out the bod later. Next, we have Snoke. Snoke serves the purpose very well in Force Awakens. Cryptic, leads on with it. Great introduction. Nothing wrong here, actually, because it gives you a lot more to look forward to next. Then is the ultimate worst Star Wars movie ever. That is The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is absolute dog shit. It's trash. Fuck Rian Johnson. I'm honestly amazed that Disney, after releasing it, number one, I'm amazed that they did release it. I don't know how you have the dignity to look at this in post-production and be like, yeah, we're going to ship this out for people to meet our next schedule. I would literally harm myself. I don't know if that's TOS. I'm apologizing if it is. I could not, as a person of character, I could not, as a person of conscience, release that movie to the public. It is absolute dog shit. And I don't know where to start. Luke, his character, is assassinated. There's plot holes out the ass. The universe is broken by its own logic. Not once, not twice, but thrice. 3 times. There's different things that happen in this movie that literally break the logic of the universe that it inhabits. Holy crap. Yeah, Luke is a completely different character. Hux is a completely different character, which I didn't even talk about. Hux is kind of interesting in The Force Awakens, but he's not really explored, and that's fine. Some characters don't get explored all in one movie. Movie 2 should have been really good for that, and he goes from literally kind of menacing rival to Kylo Ren, you know, they seem to be on power, to all of a sudden being a bitch. Literally right out the get-go. Okay. Okay. Yeah, like, just, there is nothing really good to say about The Last Jedi. It is absolute dog shit. The characters are all bad. Everyone regresses or is character assassinated or, you know, basically doesn't kind of even go on a journey of any kind of personal growth. Or if they do, they kind of regress. Rey's the only one that really gets any kind of, like, major time, but it's not really implied what her journey is. In fact, basically, this is the whole Mary Sue meme in a nutshell. Is that bad things happen to her, and she largely gets away with it scot-free. It's a travesty, this movie. I don't know how Disney had the conscience to literally let this out to have the public eye. I mean, I thought Clone Wars and Phantom Menace was pretty bad, but holy crap. Like, I would literally be like, nope, scratch, redo. Johnson, you're fired. Bring in JJ. Like, even if it hadn't been that great, like, really completely redoing the whole thing over would have been worth it. Like, I don't know how we got this movie. I really don't. And it's sad. The fact that Disney had the resources, had the ability to to do something about this, and this is what we got. I'm shocked. I'm scared. I'm terrified. This is not a good sign for the cinema industry whenever Lucasfilm and Disney has, this much writing on the line, and they just either don't give a shit or don't understand that this was an absolute piece of dog shit. So yeah, I'm just gonna table The Last Jedi, because it's just bad, all kinds of bad. So moving into the Rise of Skywalker. The problem with Rise of Skywalker is not that it doesn't try to pick up the pieces. It does. It's not. I'm not gonna say it's a horrible movie, but it's a bad movie, and it's largely the fact that it's picking up from The Last Jedi. You just can't salvage it. And it will be critically underseen from that. But if you were to divorce it and have it itself its own movie, it has the problems where you would have to reintroduce these characters and all that. But as a general level, it's got a little bit going on for it. Just nothing makes sense. Kylo's change doesn't really make a lot of sense. Basically, a lot of the motivations here don't work very well. The characters are not really explored that well. A lot of these things are for more spectacle than anything. It's just movie 8 shouldn't have happened, and honestly, movie 9 should have never have happened. Exactly, Phoenix. Last Jedi made Rise of Skywalker impossible, and it's just one of those deals where I give credit to JJ for taking it on. And, I'm not going to say it's an incredibly unentertaining movie, but it's not good. And it's just one of those deals where I don't know how it ever could have been good. It would have been impossible. And so, sorry, Rise of Skywalker, but you'll just be critically underserved by what came before you. Has JJ come out of hiding since Rise? I have no idea. He's got nothing to really be ashamed of other than the fact that he helped make the movie, but even with that, it's just hey, I'm going to do what I got to do. I don't know. It's just, the sequel trilogy is just sad. But yeah, we're at 52 minutes. We've talked a lot about what was going on here. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you were catching it just now on Twitch, definitely come check it out onto the new YouTube channel. There'll be some links coming up here before too long. If you like what I do, come support me out, whether you want to throw me a tip through basically the PayPal donation link. You can subscribe to me here on Twitch, or you can, you can help me out on Patreon. That's what it was. Plenty of ways to help me out if you like this. I'll definitely be doing more content like this. I've got plenty of things on the list, and just to kind of shout it out of what we've got going on here. I've got the Marvel Infinity Saga that we can talk about, the Doctor Who reboot. I've got Star Trek content to talk about, and then we've got more just series, whether I'm talking about Star Trek TNG or getting into the original series, prequel series, whatever. Marvel's Phase 1 through 3, House MD. I can talk about Peter Capaldi's Doctor. I can talk about all these things, and there's so much more that I can add on to it. Now, a lot of this is more sci-fi related right now. I'll definitely get into other things. I'll talk about love movies. I'll talk about all this other stuff, and I'll definitely add that to the list, actually, now that I think about it. But, yeah, if you're interested in what I do for the first episode, we're only going to get better from here going out, most likely. We might have a few trips along the line, but, yeah, that's what you have coming. And if you like, go check out my other content. Whether it is, if you want to hear about geopolitics, or you want to hear people talk about politics and social issues and all these other things. Geopolitics, Tyberius D. Mask Off with Tyberius D. And, yeah, this has been Reviews with Tyberius D. I hope you enjoyed my analysis of the Star Wars trilogies. It's been fun, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one, guys.